Good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Erica Haynes, and I'm the Director of Community Engagement at the School and State Finance Project. So, tonight we're here to talk about what to expect this legislative session. So, bear with me for one quick second, and I'm going to share my screen with you so that you can see what to expect, and we'll get this to a place where you don't have to squint too closely to your screen. Hopefully now you can see that in big space. So we're talking about what to expect this legislative session, the 2022 legislative session in Connecticut. And so there are a few things you need to know about this. This is a short session, and so the legislature convenes February 9th, 2022, and the session ends May 4th, 2022. And we still don't know whether it will be a virtual session, an in-person session, or a hybrid format. Although we're pretty optimistic from what we're hearing that public hearings at least may be still in a virtual format. And that's great because everybody can participate from the comfort of your own home. And that's going to be a wonderful thing. Last year in a virtual session, we saw from our side of things a record turnout for people speaking on school finance. That's important. So we do have a link to the Connecticut General Assembly calendar of events if you are curious and want to go there. We'll be sharing this presentation by email, but if you want this or you want to just reach out to us, please feel free. We welcome that. So Connecticut alternates between short session in even numbered years and a longer session in odd numbered years. So this year, the 2022 legislative session, it's an even numbered year, so it's a short session. And the introduction of proposed bills this session is limited to budgetary, revenue, and financial matters. So they know the time is short during this session, and so they restrict what bills are introduced, as opposed to what we had last year, which is a long session going from January to June, and legislators can introduce bills on any subject. But this year is a short session and really looking at budgetary bills. So what's on our agenda? We know it's a short year. We know it's about budgetary issues. So there are a few things, and we can head this all with student-centered funding. And really, it is about putting students at the center of any funding discussion. So here we go, and the first piece here is to expand the education cost-sharing formula to all public school students. This is so important because there are over 10 funding formulas in Connecticut, and it all depends on school type, it depends on location, it depends on who's running it, and only education cost sharing and the state charter school formula funds students based on their needs. And students come to school with a variety of needs, and not all students are the same. And if we're funding according to need, we're funding equitably. And it really is about not who's running the school, but who's going to the school, putting students in the center of it. And so the second piece that is really important to us this year is to fully fund the ECS formula in fiscal year 2025 to correspond with the expiration of the federal ESSER funds. That sounds like a lot, so I want to break it down for you. Right now, the education cost sharing formula is being phased in over 10 years. Started in 2019, it's scheduled to be completed in 2028. That means that the state is moving towards meeting their full funding obligations for every district, but that districts won't be fully funded until 2028. They are fully funded each year according to the formula, but the full aggregate funding doesn't happen in total until 2028. So we're proposing an acceleration of that. And here's why. The federal dollars, which were so necessary for our schools, had $1.7 billion come into the state of Connecticut to support our schools, our teachers, our students, and again, students in the center, right? But the problem is that money goes away, and it goes away in 3 timelines. The smallest package was the first, and those funds must be spent by September of this year, 2022. The second federal funding package, those funds need to be spent by September of 2023. Or allocated, I should say. A fine difference, but a difference nonetheless. And then in 2024, September of 2024, all of the final funds have to be allocated. And then there's nothing left for schools. And so what that creates, and what we call that, is a fiscal cliff, right? Where you've got a buildup of dollars and then one day they just disappear, drop off completely. And so if we fully fund education cost sharing in that 24 to 25 school year, which is called fiscal 25, that cliff won't be so huge. It'll be a dip, but it won't be that cliff. And that really helps for the sustainability of our schools, supporting our kids, and really allowing schools to spend the money in a way that they can continue. If you hire staff and there's a fiscal cliff, you don't have the funds to continue to pay those staff members. And those staff members are supporting our kids. So those are the 2 big focuses for us. So want to just get you kind of thinking about key dates. And the start of the regular session is February 9th. And the proposed bill deadline is February 10th. Wow, is that quick, right? But then you'll notice that February 25th is the raised bill and first committee deadline. So as things are happening in committees, these pieces are getting sorted out in what is going to be explored more, heard in committees, talked about. And so here you see the next real key date being March 18th, the second education committee bill deadline. The committee, really what you need to know here is that the committee, we expect the committee in the first few weeks of March to be holding, or mid-March, to be holding their public hearings. So that's kind of something you need to be aware of. And look, right after that is that second appropriations committee bill deadline. What's the difference between education committee and appropriations committee? The education committee is looking at all things education related, But the Appropriations Committee is responsible for the spending piece of Connecticut's bill in totality. Doesn't matter if Connecticut is spending on education or transportation. The Appropriations Committee are the folks who are looking at all of that and putting that together. So when we talk about funding education cost sharing on an earlier schedule, that's an education issue. It is also a spending issue. So again, we expect some of those public hearings by March 20th, really. And then the committees need to reach their or actually Appropriations Committee needs to reach its joint favorable deadline. That means we all have to have something that we agree on. Whatever is moving forward for the end of session and whatever is moving forward for the General Assembly as a whole to vote on, that comes out of that deadline. And after that deadline is what you'll see as to what the General Assembly is going to vote on. And then ideally, the process is that the General Assembly, both the House and Senate, vote, and a budget goes to the governor, who in kind of this line would either sign the budget or veto it. But we're going to talk about he's going to sign it. We're going to be optimistic here, and session ends May 4th. So a couple key things I want to just kind of go back to. We expect that we may have 2 public hearings, one in education and one in appropriations, and those will happen right in beginning to mid-March. What does that mean to you? That's when we need you to submit testimony, or if you are willing to actually testify in front of each committee, one at a time. And so that's kind of the schedule to think about. So I talked a little bit about ways that you can get involved. First step, right now you should be contacting your elected officials and letting them know what's important to you and why. Why is education important to you? Why is student-centered funding important to you? You definitely, I hope you are willing to submit written testimony or sign up to speak at a public hearing. And finally, telling your story is so important. So we're going to be hosting some workshops on telling your story, on how to talk about the things that you care about. Make sure, to talk about that dream that you may have about your child's education. What's your story? Why is education so important to you? So we're going to do some of that workshopping. It's also important to get involved at a local level, and I want to be really thoughtful about that. A lot of you, your communities right now are looking at your local education budget. Go and get involved. Ask what's going on. Listen in on a Board of Ed meeting. Most of them are virtual right now. Let local elected officials know that school finance is important to you and that you're watching the legislature this year, and you're hoping that your local officials will advocate in the best interest of your community. So definitely stay tuned with us. I'm going to stop the share. I want to just thank you so much for staying with me and watching as I do this. And if you want to reach out to me, here's the very best way. Email me. It's Erika, ERIKA, Haynes, HAYNES, at ctschoolfinance.org. That and ask any questions. Let me know how I can help. Do you want to learn more about school finance? I'll sit down with you. Do you want workshops in your community? we can make that happen. So reach out and hopefully you feel a little better about what's happening in legislative session this year. With that, I'm going to stop our recording